Hello and welcome, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the first entry in the monster manual, Aarakocra. So, Aarakocra are a race of bird like, human like creatures. They originate from the elemental plane of air, and I say human like instead of humanoid because in the older monster manual, which I'm going to be calling Legacy, the Aarakocra had the creature type humanoid, but in the new book they have the creature type elemental, which is interesting. They kind of did that with another race, lizard folk. Lizard folk used to be humanoid in the Legacy book, but they're also elemental now, and they're tied to like the elemental plane of Earth, which is interesting. Yeah, Aarakocra are now elemental technically. And so I might say humanoid instead of human like. I really just mean human like. And so the average Aarakocra stands about 5 feet tall. They've got bird like talons for feet and a pair of feather wings that reached about a wingspan of 20 feet. Now, these wings could either be on the back like an angel's wings or a part of the arms like a wyvern's. Like the oldest versions of Aarakocra, they kind of had the wings as a part of the arms, but the newest versions typically have the wings attached to the back and the arms separate. Other than that, they are covered in feathers, and these feathers can be pretty much any color. The range that an Aarakocra can be is pretty wide. Typically, you see them looking as like kind of white, kind of eagle like. Like in the Legacy book, that's what they look like, white, eagle kind of idea. Same in Monsters of the Multiverse, same in the modern book. Um, but in the book itself, typically it says they typically resemble eagles or parrots. But I think that you can pretty much take any bird and turn your Aarakocra into that sort of thing. In the land of Chult, the birds there, they typically more resemble parrots, but they have like super colorful plumage. Their feathers are all kinds of different colors. And so when making an Aarakocra, either to as your race to play or as monsters for your players to fight, I think you could make them pretty much any kind of color or model them after any kind of bird that you want. Range of colors or birds that you could use, pretty much limitless. All right, and so originally the Aarakocra served the Windukes of Aka. Aka is Aaqa. Aka is this place in the elemental plane of air, and so they served these guys. Their charge was to scout the plains for signs of elemental evil. But specifically in the Legacy book, the whole idea behind the Aarakocra is that they serve these Windukes, and one of their most esteemed positions serving the Windukes was searching for the pieces of this thing called the Rod of Seven Parts. And so long ago, during this conflict known as the Dawn War, very early in the Forgotten Realms history, the Windukes, which the Windukes are basically these beings known as Vati, uh, the Windukes created the Rod of Law, and they use this rod to banish the demon lord Miska the Wolf Spider. When they did this, however, the rod split into 7 parts that scattered across the multiverse, becoming known as the Rod of Seven Parts. So the main idea in the Legacy book was that these Aarakocra are kind of sentinels, not only looking for signs of elemental evil, but they're also looking out for these 7 parts of this rod. And so typically they do this job in like high places. That's usually where they can be found, like the tops of mountains or any other place where portals into the elemental plane of air lie, which typically is like high mountain tops, big airy places, stuff that has to do with air. But yeah, I would say even like big windswept plains, that could be where an elemental plane of a portal to the elemental plane of air could lie. But yeah, they also stand as guards here on the lookout for any threats to their home plane. And so in the legacy version, the Aarakocra were also known to hold certain elemental powers, such as summoning an air elemental. You would need 5 Aarakocra all within 30 feet of each other. They would perform this sort of aerial dance over the course of 3 rounds. And once they do this aerial dance, the 5 of them, they would summon an air elemental. And so basically, the air elemental was friendly to them, it obeyed their commands, and it would stick around for an hour. When the elemental returns to the elemental plane of air after an hour, any Aarakocra within 5 feet of it can return with it. In the modern version, they don't have that ability. That was only a weird little thing in the legacy book. But yeah, then in Monsters of the Multiverse, they gave us a playable race. And it's all pretty regular, humanoid, medium, walking speed 30 feet, flying speed. The flying speed was kind of a big deal when Monsters of the Multiverse came out, because not a lot of playable races, especially not official playable races, got flying speeds. But specifically, it gave them the ability to cast Gust of Wind. That was pretty much it. They could fly, they could cast Gust of Wind. But then we move into the modern book, and it's a little different now. So in the modern book, we have 2 types of Aarakocra. We have the Aarakocra Aeromancer and the Aarakocra Skirmisher. Now, the Skirmisher is pretty much just like the fighter. They have their regular Talons attack, which does more damage if it's moving straight towards the target. But yeah, like kind of flying around, swooping in, slashing. They also get this thing called a Wind Javelin, which basically same thing as a javelin, 1d6 piercing, but it does a little bit of thunder damage. And even cooler, if the skirmisher throws this thing, it will magically return to their hand, which is rather interesting. And so something I want to talk about also is that in older lore and stuff, the Aarakocra use these things called flight lances. And so the whole idea behind flight lances were like they were designed in a way that they were really easy to use flying through the air. It was easy to perform aerial maneuvers and things. And so I kind of like the idea of this wind javelin flight lance. They're very similar, it feels like. I really like the wind javelin though, being able to chuck it, deal some extra thunder damage. It comes immediately back to your hand. That's really cool. And then we have the Aeromancer. So the Aeromancer is basically the air mage of the Aarakocra. They're a little more powerful. They get a wind staff, which can do extra lightning damage on a hit. But then they also get certain spells. They get elementalism, which just that's a new modern spell. It's a cantrip, a bunch of little elemental effects. They also get gust of wind. So that's kind of like what the Monsters of the Multiverse had. Mage Hand, Message, but then they get Lightning Bolt. And just 1 per day, though. Then they get Featherfall as well, which makes sense. This is just all the spell casting. This is just this. The Aeromancer is just the air mage of the Aarakocra. And so I think I actually really like what they did in the modern stuff. Having them be elementals is kind of weird, But honestly, I don't think I care. Like, you could still play the race as an elemental. Something I think I would do as an Aarakocra, there's this ability called Flyby, where if you're flying by a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks. I feel like that would be a neat little thing to add to an Aarakocra, especially the skirmisher, because it seems like their whole thing is like either throwing the wind javelin, which is very cool anyways, or flying down, like swiping with their talons or with the wind javelin and then flying back up. But also you could make like a path. I don't actually know how this works in the modern books, but in the Legacy there was this Path of the Totem Warrior, and you could choose elk. Now it's like Path of the Wild Heart, and I'm not sure if elk is an option, but you could choose elk, and I think it would increase your movement speed, but it would also like either give you disadvantage or give people disadvantage on opportunity attacks against you, or something like that. And so that, I feel like Path of the Elk Aarakocra could be really cool, like flying down, attacking. Could you imagine like a whole tribe of these elk Aarakocra? And I could, you could make any reason to explain it away, like maybe it's not Path of the Elk, you just gave it those abilities, and it's like, oh, this is a certain tribe of the Aarakocra, you know. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have on Aarakocra, everything I know about him. So now you can know all that about him. And so that's all I have for you today.